Hello and welcome everyone. We are so excited to be here today. We have an amazing lineup of speakers for you for our conversation about caregivers and the release of the audiobook of Tending. So today we are going to hear from 5 incredible speakers who are changing the cultural narrative about parenthood and caregiving's impact on career performance, as we celebrate the release of the audiobook version of Tending by Amy Henderson. And so today we are joined by David, who is the controller and VP at Chevron. We are joined by Jacqueline, who is a leading behavioral scientist who's been studying burnout among working caregivers. Lola, who is a sophomore at Stanford and the co-founder of Project Matriarchs, an organization working to mobilize Gen Zers across the country to advocate for working caregivers. Marianne, who is the CEO and founder of Global Diversity Leadership and the author of a number of different books. And last but definitely not least, our amazing facilitator for the day, which is Amy Henderson, our host, who will be taking and guiding us through the conversation. So up first, just a couple of house rules. You will notice that you are all muted and we are not seeing your beautiful faces. And so with that, please use the chat functionality. You will see on the right-hand side of your screen where you can send in messages and communicate with each other. In doing that, please also share any comments or excitement that you have about the content that we are lucky enough to hear today. You will also notice down here that you have the ability to add reactions. This is a great way, I'm going to show you now, to share with the speakers what you're feeling and what you're experiencing as they're talking. So please do that. The one other thing I will note, we do have Marianne is actually joining us from a location that was not planned. And so she may have a little bit of trouble with her audio. So please bear with us with that as we navigate the lovely world of virtual that we still live in, everyone. So with that said, I am going to disappear from the stage and we'll hand over the microphone to our host for today, Amy Henderson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for showing up for this conversation. I'm really grateful to all of you. Just also a few housekeeping things very quickly. We are recording this session, and there's also a filmmaker here in my home recording me as we do this session. So it is twice being captured for all of us to be able to participate in this meaningful conversation. Before we get into the meaty conversation with these incredible panelists that we've selected, I wanted to take a minute and just acknowledge the real pain and challenges that are a part of being a working caregiver today. There are many of us who are here part of this conversation on this panel, in the webverse, participating and listening, who have personally been affected by it and who have lost friends who have been affected by the challenges that working parents face. And I just want to give acknowledgement and honor to the very real challenges that are a part of being a working caregiver today. And also, I intentionally selected these panelists because they represent, I think, the 2 demographics of folks that have been the most impacted because of the pandemic. And that is teenagers, which the World Health Organization defines up until the age of 25, and also working caregivers. I think the pandemic has had a disproportionately challenging impact on the mental health of these 2 groups. And I love that the people who are represented here are all advocating on behalf of caregivers in the workplace. Even Lola, who is not yet a caregiver, but is a college student, has built an organization that is about mobilizing her generation to take action. And I actually know Dave because of his son, who's also an incredible young person doing incredible work and activism to change our cultural narrative. So it's really great to be here to give honor and voice to those who are most impacted by this time. And I deeply believe, and if you read or listen to Tending, my book, you'll understand more about this, but I deeply believe that the very real challenges that we face especially the hardest ones, are the ones that offer us the greatest opportunity for transformation. That when we can sit with and be with and really own the darkness, that it gives us a greater opportunity to stretch towards and live in the light. And that's what this conversation is going to be all about. It's going to be about people who have faced that darkness within themselves and within their work, and who are really committed to bringing what they have discovered in that darkness, the light that they found, into the world in a way that can benefit us all. And it is just my great honor to be here in conversation with these leaders. I'm gonna go through and introduce them for you in a personal way, so you get a sense of who they are. And I'm gonna start with who is on the top of my screen, which is Dave. So I mentioned that I know Dave through his son, Mikkel. Mikkel is an incredible young transgender man who has a big part in my family and in my children's lives. He came and spent a summer helping us build a vegetable garden in our backyard, and we are really grateful and fortunate to have him in our lives. He also did most of the footnotes, along with the wonderful Sophia Catherine Lewis, for tending the book. He interned with me to help me get this book out into the world in a really meaningful way. And through the course of that, I had the opportunity to meet his dad and his mom, and discovered that we share a deep kinship for the value of caregivers in the workplace and why they're so important. So Dave, would you tell us a little bit about why it is that you showed up for this conversation today? What led you to say, yes, I'm going to be on stage in front of a lot of people in an event that's filmed twice over, talking about the importance of caregivers?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Amy. Let me first say it is truly my privilege to be part of this distinguished panel. So thank you for inviting me in. Why am I here today? A few things. I think first and foremost, you said it right. It's my son, Mikkel. I think that connection is the main reason I'm here. I wouldn't probably know you otherwise. But also the experience my wife and I shared as parents to a transgender son. While both of us worked for a large corporation overseas for 2 decades, working parents with a transgender son in all these different countries was a lot of learnings from that. And so I feel like I have something to share there. I guess the third reason is my other inspiration here is my daughter, Alex, a newish mother and career editor who's raising a 3-year-old daughter with her husband in Virginia. So just seeing the challenges faced by working parents these days through her eyes as they navigate careers and parenting. And then finally, I'm here because of you, Amy, this amazing book you've written. Your stories and insights resonate strongly with me. Reading your book felt like that moment when the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle finally fit and the big picture emerges or starts to emerge. So thank you, Amy, for the book.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Mary Ann. Did we just lose her? Oh, no, great. Okay, great. Mary Ann. So Mary Ann and I actually met. It might have even been on stage at a Prince concert in New Orleans when I was, as an event I write about in the book, I was running an organization I'd co-founded with Van Jones and the rock star Prince around increasing racial diversity in the tech sector. And Mary Ann was a longtime friend of my co-founders and was at our launch of the initiative, Yes We Code, in New Orleans at the Essence Music Festival with Prince. And we have recently reconnected again through our mutual friend and colleague, Laura Jackal Dickinson, because of her incredible work advocating on behalf of the industry. But Mary Ann and I share this kinship and this connection. Oh, she just lost her connection. Okay, there you are. Great. So Mary Ann, yep, we can hear you just fine. Marianne, I don't want to steal your thunder and share your story, but I do want to just ask you what it is that led you to say yes to show up for this conversation, given the context of your journey as a single mother to a son with cerebral palsy and all that that has taught you in the capacity to be impactful in your career and in the world.
Well, so I guess let me first start by saying I'm so happy to see you, and I'm delighted to be included in this conversation. I'm calling in from the airport in Nashville, Tennessee, so I hope that you can hear me. But before I begin, I want to acknowledge that Tennessee is the land of the Cherokee, who are known as certain kind of caregiver. They're known as planters of good seeds. And their nurturance practices are based on beliefs that assume each child possesses qualities to develop into a worthwhile individual with a community of caregivers, encouraging correct behavior by acknowledging traits that would be helpful as the child grows older. And I thought that was significant because as I read through your book, that was a theme that came up and it resonated with me because I like to think of myself as a planter of good seeds, but I didn't business at the same time. I became a single parent when my son's father and I divorced before he was a year old. And he came early, he was only 26 weeks. And so he was only 26 ounces. So the start of my business and my son's life were, in a word, stressful. He was in intensive care for 83 days and had 7 surgeries during his first 11 years. And he has cerebral palsy and ADHD. And in his early years, he had seizures and chronic migraines, and all the way owning my own business gave me the flexibility to arrange my schedule to do what I needed to do, to go to medical appointments, therapies, and be his mother, his nurse, his advocate, his teacher, and his best friend until he was 13 years old. And that's when I realized I could no longer do it alone. And Amy, in chapter 4 of your book, you talk about how ambition and motherhood are not opposed to one another and that it's natural. And mothers are not meant to raise our kids in isolation all on our own. We depend on others. Human brains entice us to connect with other brains to form a collective brain, which we access both for regulation and knowledge. You wrote that. And as a single parent, running a successful business, active on boards, I realized that when my son turned 13, I needed help. So I gave him a black mitzvah. Yeah, that's what I said, a black mitzvah, a rite of passage to mark his journey into adulthood. And the purpose of it was to enlist a village of men to form my collective brain trust for regulation and knowledge, sort of their collective dad. Men who we trusted, admired, that he could turn to for advice and counsel and wisdom about how to cope with challenges unique to boys striving to become men. And my son really needed that extra help as a young Black boy with a disability, yearning to become the hero he wants to be. And now 14 years later, he's a college student pursuing his dream career in animation. And I don't know how I could have done it without their support. And I write about my son and his 4 mentors, his circle of kings, I call them, in my own book, Warrior Rising, how 4 men helped a boy in his journey to manhood. So as a mother of a child with a disability, and at running my own company, I had an opportunity to create our own policy, being sort of parent sensitive. And I'll stop there because I'm sure we're going to talk some more, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what we did at our company to accommodate children based on my own personal experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Thank you. Dr. Kerr, Dr. Jacqueline Kerr, it is such an honor to have you here with us for this conversation. I am deeply inspired by your journey, by the generosity of your spirit, by the courage in sharing your own story, so that those who are also suffering will know they're not alone. And I would love for you to share a bit about your story and the work that you're now doing and why I am so inspired by you. Tell us all why you are such an inspiration in this work.
And thank you for that. I'll try and get through it as best I can.
Okay, can you hear me?
So
my own experience, as I said, influenced my attitude about parental needs. And so at IBIS,
Sorsha, I think
children are
hello?
Can you hear me?
Marianne, we're talking with Jacqueline now, but we're going to get to that question next, I promise. Hello? Okay. Jacqueline, you're up now for that question about your story.
Right. And again, I think that's so important. What you said is, I'm here so people do not feel alone, and I'm also here because you were so vulnerable in your book, and you showed me and so many others that vulnerability is okay. So what I'll preface here, and I'll try and keep it short, is I'm not a suicide prevention expert, but I can describe my experience. And suicide ideation is a symptom of burnout. And I know I have friends who are counselors who caution me talking about suicide in the framework of burnout, because it doesn't always get that bad. And it's really important that if you're burnt out and you're not feeling suicide ideation, that you're still burnt out and it's still a problem. So ruminating and resentment are also symptoms of burnout. So yeah, let's catch those early. Don't let it get this bad. But essentially my story is I was burned out and I was experiencing suicide ideation, to the point I wrote my kids a letter to try and explain to them why their life would be better without me. But the last line in that letter said, "I'm sorry I was not able to ask for help." And I think some part of that touched me and made me realize, hold on, I can ask for help. So I did. And then a therapist explained to me that children are more likely to die by suicide if a parent has. And so that really stayed with me when I struggled in the next weeks after that. And then later, I learned from a book called The Language of Emotions that even wanting to end your life is a guide to help you find a new and different life. And that made a lot of sense to me and really helped me process some of the shame I was experiencing as a mother to have these feelings. So yeah, that's not necessarily what's going to help other people. And but it helped me. And so that's how now I try and share this journey. And I asked my husband about it too, is should I not be talking about this? And he said, yeah, this is the stuff that people don't talk about and that we need to. So I know it's difficult and everybody's experiences are different, but you're not alone. And I think one of the quotes too that I found really helpful from your book was, "I've founded and run successful ventures before, but this is my first time running a business with a deeply personal mission, and it takes a much greater toll on me because I care about it so much." So I think that also just reminds us of all these people working in situations where you have a mission. You can burn out from working on such deeply personal and caring missions. So a caution to us all for that, to take care of ourselves. But yeah, thank you, Amy, for helping me find my voice and being vulnerable. And I'm here so others do not feel alone.
Jacqueline, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Later, we're going to talk about your incredible, the incredible wisdom you bring to this space. Not just the emotional wisdom and the courage of being with your experience and sharing it, but what you have done with that in terms of your incredible capacity to see a way out through change that benefits so many. And we're going to get into that. But Lola, I'm going to introduce you now. So Lola and I met maybe about a year ago, and I was really deeply inspired by you and your founder, Pilar, who's also a sophomore this year and at Brown. You had chosen to take a gap year at the beginning of the pandemic, and you founded an organization called Project Matriarchs that was initially designed to help students find access to online college mentors. So younger students access to online college mentors. You had a strong focus on making sure that kids who couldn't afford it get access to it. Really about, using your generation's capacity to support young people that were going through crisis, having to school at home while the schools were all shut. And through the course of that, you saw what was happening to working caregivers and became really passionate about it. And so you formed the second phase of Project Matriarchs, which you're working on now, is really about mobilizing your entire generation to take a stand on behalf of working caregivers, to tell your future employers, look, this is untenable. We will not put up with this. We expect you to treat current and future working caregivers much better than you do. And you worked with a whole team of other students to write this very well-researched, thought-out Pledge to Care campaign. Can you tell us, Lola, what it is that drove you to take on this issue and to advocate for it so successfully, so intelligently, and also with so much mobilized effort behind you? You've got, an arsenal of students throughout the nation who are working with you on this. Tell us about that.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you, Amy, for your book. Thank you for having me, and thank you, everyone prior, for sharing and for your vulnerability. I will say I think this work began out of personal anger. To be honest, Pilar, my co-founder, and I started reading the macro trends that were being projected around women leaving the workforce at the beginning of the pandemic. And personally, as someone who was raised by two moms, and so I was raised in a slightly unconventional caregiving model. I wasn't privy to the sort of the dynamics of care splitting that sometimes tend to occur in heterosexual relationships. So I was stunned and I was angry and indignant. I felt like I cannot believe that I'm going to inherit these norms. Like, how can this still be the case? And so Pilar and I started thinking about what we could do. In any small way urgently, because the need for support was urgent at the beginning of the pandemic, to pull together a solution to provide relief to working caregivers. Really, working mothers was our focus at the beginning. And so I say this because the beginning phases, doing sort of the need finding research of just talking to women in our communities about their experiences thus far during the pandemic, was one of the most moving experiences of my life. I would say it was a common theme that people felt like they can't talk about this with their friends because they'll break down, and so they keep it to themselves and they deal with their caregiving and work responsibilities personally and privately. And to Pilar and I, that was devastating. And we felt like, not only for our future selves as we think about entering the workforce and consider starting families in the future, but also for all of the caregivers right now who are suffering because of insufficient support at a systemic level, whether that's from their employers or their states or federal government, as we all know. And so we started with that virtual childcare and tutoring service. Really, the idea was to take kids off of their parents or caregivers' hands to provide relief. And so it looked like a college student playing games with a 3-year-old over Zoom, or it looked like a college student mentoring a high school student having trouble staying focused and happy during the pandemic. It looked like a huge range of things. But yes, as Amy mentioned, we are now shifting towards advocacy because we feel like this work is so in line with our generation's spirit and our unique capacity to mobilize around things we care about. And every single one of the 800 plus college students that we've interviewed to work with us have a personal connection and conviction around care and the relationships that have defined the quality of their life thus far. And so our work right now is to try to make that leap from personal relationships to care to catalyzing people to take action around systemic change. And so that is our work right now. We're building a community of Gen Z people learning and thinking and talking about care, both on an interpersonal level and a more systemic level, to ultimately hope that our generation moves into the workforce and adulthood expecting systems of care, not just relationships of care. So I'll stop there. And thank you again, Amy, and everyone else for. Oh, one thing I did want to add was that I think I'm especially excited to be here because it is not an understatement to say that Amy's book completely changed my perspective about parenting. At the beginning of the pandemic, I told both of my moms, I don't think I'm going to have kids. I don't want to live in a world that's not going to support me and is going to make me do this alone. And so reading Amy's book really changed my thinking. So I want to thank her for her book once again.
Well, I'm so excited to hear more about that. I want to know how it changed your thinking so that you want to become a parent now. Sorsha, if it's okay, there's another person in the audience that I would love to invite up onto the stage, and it's Onyema. Onyema, if he could come up, I'd like him to say a little bit about this conversation too. I'm going to give him a minute to come on up. I know, Sorsha, it takes a second technically to make that happen. We're going to branch next into this conversation around, oh, I see Onyema. Onyema, do you have your video on? Can you do that?
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yep.
Yeah, let me turn the camera on too, hang on.
Okay, great. So I'm going to introduce you, Onyema, and then I want you to answer the same question everyone else has answered, which is why did you show up for this conversation? But in the context, I'm going to introduce Onyema. You and I met over a decade ago when we were neighbors in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And since that time, you've had an incredible career in a number of different industries. You have reinvented yourself many times. You are currently a professor at an HBCU. You're also the founder of an incredible biotech startup and a new father. You have a daughter that you just welcomed into the world. So you're right in that window of brain plasticity that's available to new parents. And you've been actively showing up for that journey of being a parent. I am really interested in why you showed up for this conversation and why you care about this issue and why you think it's particularly important for people that have your background, your technical, intellectual capacity, as well as your diverse background, why it's critically important that you are involved in this conversation and aware of all that caregivers have access to and the capacities they develop and why they are so critically needed in the workplace, active caregivers. I know that's a lot, but whatever you want to bite off there, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
First of all, thank you for reaching out and giving me an opportunity to connect with everyone here. Amazing stories, and thank you all for previous members of the panel for sharing. So what it comes down to is this really is like, if we all would not be here, if someone did not do the work of caregiving, right? At some point, someone did that for us, and we do that. We are blessed as those who take the journey as parents to be able to step into that role and to move that cycle along. And I think that because we've allowed it to become a kind of like this just shadow economy, where like it's things that we're needed, we must happen, but we just kind of assume it's going to get done and someone else will do it, and we've intellectualized it in weird ways. But I think the important part when it comes to why people who are from other facets and intellectual journeys should know it is because I think in some respects we've started to water sort of to deny its power, and not be respectful of the fact that those of us who choose to do this work, and I say work only in the sense that it is active in conscious engagement, not as in a slog. I mean, I love being a dad. It's insane. I can't get enough of my daughter. Honestly, it literally adds more meaning to my life than my PhD, any of the scientific research I've done. I've never been happier in my life, quite frankly. And I don't know if I would want much more of a life without her and my amazing wife. That being said, we have to celebrate it more in society. We need to bring it into the forefront. I think that's great how I talked to, when I was an executive, in the past and for the companies I run now, you always talk about getting your teams driven towards the goals and your mission. The missions are massive. And it feels like those things are important. We have to solve these crazy and insane ails of our society, global warming, obviously, the lack of justice in many communities. And some of these things are, moving ahead, and some of these things are not moving as fast. But I feel if we got better, even just attending, we get a lot of those lessons naturally from them. And you start to get this empathy that for other people that you can share and spread naturally into other facets of life. And then you makes you just naturally, as you speak to in your book, Amy, it just naturally, if done with a conscious mind, naturally can make you better at all those things, which has this kind of infectious effect where you start to see first in local pockets, hopefully, and if we get it, if we're able to do it in global pockets, improvements that are measurable and real, and hopefully, and I dare I say definitely sustainable. So for me, that's a big part of why I was blessed to have you bring me into the fold and talk more about your amazing work in this book you put out, Amy. And as a scientist, as an engineer, as a mathematician, all those things lumped together, it helped me to decouple all that logic and realize like there's something greater than that. It's not just this one step. It's actually the most obvious logic. That love that we bring to those people that we tend to and the children that we raise is the highest vibration of our living, and it makes all of this worth it. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, I felt that. Thank you, Onyema. Thank you. The next question I'm gonna ask all of you that are up here is, what is it that you think you have gained through parenting that impacts your ability to show up in the world in all areas of your life, including your career? And I want to put this in the context of what I often share with myself in the darkest moments and with parents and their advocates that I work with, which is that it's the hardest times where we forge ourselves, where we gain and earn the things that we can't get anywhere else. And so I'd love for you to tell us about something that you have gained and earned through parenthood, and possibly the darkness from which you developed that. Like, what is that hard thing that you were up against that parenthood forced you to come up against, or that parenthood forced you to look at, parenthood forced you to reckon with? How did you make peace with it? And what did you gain and earn as a result? In my book, I talk about the 5 main capacities that over 80% of parents I interviewed reported. But I find that in individual conversations, the way that manifests, what that looks like, is often incredibly varied and often rooted in some deep, dark place that was able to be transformed. So I think for this round, I think, Marianne, why don't we start with you, because I know you have some limitations in your schedule today with your emergency need to be at the airport. So why don't we go perspective given you? How has it forged you?
Well, so what comes up for me, and it's something that Lola kind of addressed, and that is the importance of being able to enjoy parenthood and also have a career, the importance of policy within the corporate workplace. That has become a real passion for me because we know that as parents, the issues that come up for emergency childcare, or for even if it's caring for an elder care, so it could be other kinds of situations that require you to be the best that you can be and also take care of it. Allows for parents to be the good parents they want to be and also sustain a lifestyle. So right now, within my own company, because I had the natural sensibility, because of my own experience, we had sort of an ad hoc parent ERG, if you will, so that when issues came up, we would discuss amongst ourselves and solve our problems together. But I know that that's a luxury, and that's not representative of most companies. In fact, according to Fairy God Boss, 55% of companies offer paid maternity leave, and depending on that company, that may or may not include fathers. So a couple of good companies that come to mind that really have great policy are Netflix and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I think it is, that offer 52 weeks of paid maternity leave. Intercontinental Hotels Group offers 50 weeks, and Etsy, Salesforce, and Dannon have pretty good policies at 26 paid leave. But because so many companies don't offer those kinds of benefits, most workers, most of which are median income workers, struggle with having the challenge of childcare and need federal public policy for paid family leave. A caregiver for a child or family member with a disability, aging parents, faces unique challenges, and dependents need more attention, healthcare and medical needs, academic support, which I had to, make time for with my son who has ADHD. And these needs parents have to be able to have the ability to take care of their family and enough to earn enough to support them. So public policy, and Amy, you talk about this in your book. I think it's in like chapter 3, and I fastened on chapter and highlighted it because and you mentioned that in the US, the absence of federal financial support for childcare negatively affects the careers of 3/4 of parents with young children. And it's why it's so important for companies to debts, increase breastfeeding, improve mental health, and decrease stress for the whole family. And it provides a straightforward way for workers to care for their health and health of their families. And so we need to urge legislators to pass paid family leave. The United States is still the only first world nation that doesn't require that new mothers receive paid leave. And the Family Medical Leave Act, which provides certain employees with up to 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave per year, but only supports parents attending to children as a result of childbirth. And therefore, the largest portion of the FEMLA population, those taking medical leave for family members is on their own illness, is funded by state governments out of unemployed insurance coffers. And some states, such as California, New York, provide paid leave for up to 6 weeks, but most don't. So there are people in Congress who are pushing paid leave proposals that tap into our Social Security income. But there's a couple problems with that, because those bills would ask individual parents to bear the cost of their parental leave benefits by cutting their Social Security retirement benefits that they would receive decades later, which would impact their future retirement accounts. So it's not fair. And of course, it impacts women more because over the lifetime of our careers, we earn less because of a wage gap and because we take time off. And then we live longer.
Yeah, just because Marianne mentioned it, I want to give a shout out to 2 people who are here in this session with us, 2 of our attendees, Amy Beacom and Lori Mahalik-Levin, who are both real leaders in the parental leave space, building incredible, important organizations, initiatives, doing research and work, advocating on behalf of parents taking leave here in the US. So I want to give a big shout out to them for that incredible work. And Marianne, we're having a bit of a hard time with your connection, so I'm going to move on to the next person, but feel free to put anything that you wanted to continue to add in the chat. Okay, I'm going to go next to, let's see, Jacqueline. I would love for you to share with us, how has parenthood forged you? What have you gained and earned through your journey of being a working parent that possibly nothing else could have forced you to develop?
Thanks for this opportunity. So yeah, I mean, I described my experience of suicide ideation, and that was obviously a very dark place from which I have come. But I think actually that whole process was triggered by becoming a mother. And I think that's something that we don't really quite realize, is that motherhood is going to take us to a place we've never been before, in terms of, for me, the type of parent I wanted to be. And that really, for me, was when I started not liking myself. And that was really hard, because I didn't like the type of parent I was. So I think what this experience has allowed me is to really learn a lot about emotional intelligence, a lot about trying not to prove myself, not to be the perfectionist. So those things I have gained incredibly from that process of learning. And I think particularly for my son, he's on the autism spectrum and he's high functioning, but communicating to his brain is really challenging. And so that's something I think I've gained such an understanding of different brains, because he'll say something to me and I'll just go, okay, my brain and his brain are not connecting. Where could his brain possibly be? Like how could he be seeing this differently? And I think that has just helped me think about perspective taking, which is so important for everything we do with our kids and also in the workplace, to really go, what could be where are they coming from that makes it so different from where I'm coming from? And so I think, that this combination of my story with my skills, and so I'm a public health behavior change scientist, and I really understand how we change large groups of people. So I'm so impressed by the advocacy efforts that Mary and Lola and others have spoken about, because that's how we do change. And this is where I come from in public health, understanding, one, that the disparities we have in health are created by the systems we're part of, but also the solutions to those disparities come also from multi-level solutions. So how I describe it is, we do have to change as individuals, and I had to do a lot of work there, but we need organizational change and we need cultural change. And I think you address all of those as well in your book, in terms of seeing that at different levels there are different things we need to do. But essentially all of it comes down to still this concept of behavior change, which is, if you're a decision maker, how are you making your decisions, and why are you making those decisions? And sometimes it's because of what your brain and your biases are telling you to do, but sometimes it's because there's a system in place that bypasses those biases. And I think that's something we might chat about later, Amy, but that is also really important for us to think about, is recognizing those biases and being able to bypass them. And kind of an example relating to what Mary is talking about with paid leave, we need that to be a default for all caregivers, because it's the default that is the key behavior to changing norms. When you have to opt out of something, it totally is a different behavior than opting into something. So it's so important.
Jacqueline, every time you speak, I learn something new from you, and I could just sit at your feet and absorb this wisdom that you have to share, this hard-earned wisdom that you've gained through your years of academia. And will you, just for folks who maybe haven't read your bio, can you just brag for 1 minute and tell us where you are in your career, in terms of, where you stand relative to other scientists in your space?
Amy, I so appreciate this. If anyone struggles with self-promotion, have Amy by your side. I'm in the top 1% of most cited scientists worldwide. So I think that, to me, is what's so important about this burnout work. Is it's not because we're not capable, okay? It's because we're left out and we're burned out. And it's the same with female physicians, for example. They have better surgical outcomes, and the research shows they are more likely to save a life in the ER. And they're 250% more likely to attempt suicide. So it's so important that we understand that part of this drive for achievement is also related to a burnout. So unpacking that, unlocking that is so important. But we have, as mothers and as caregivers, we have so much to give and so much to bring. As I say, in terms of physicians having better outcomes and saving lives, there it is, right there. That's an incredible bonus that we can gain from female physicians.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. Dave, I'm going to come to you next. So Dave, we, like I mentioned in your intro, and like you referenced, we met because of your wonderful son, Mick. And you have been an incredible supporter of Mick from the time he was 5 in recognizing and allowing him to claim his gender identity in a world that would otherwise, I know many young trans folks who have not had support from their families, who have not had support from the world around them. And you, from the time he was 5, recognized that while he was born with a certain gender, he actually was a different gender. And your courage and your conviction and your commitment to supporting him through that journey, I'd love to know, A, where you sourced that from, and B, if that impacted the way you showed up in your career.
Yeah, so let me start to go back 34 years when I first became a parent, the first time before Mick. I think what I learned then is timing is not something I can control or manage. So I think I became very adaptable, flexible, resilient, creative. I acquired skills that would have been hard to acquire in the workplace or anywhere else, just because you no longer are running your life. You're trying to keep up with another person's life. So from the very first moments of being,
that's when you became a father for the first time, 34 years ago.
First time, that was Alex, my first, right. And then another daughter, Sam, and then Mikkel was born 21 years ago. And we've always had, both my previous wife and my current wife, mothers to those 3 children, we've always had the children first is the mantra for our family. And so we're going to do what's best for the child first. And it makes decision making easier. We're gonna put them first. So Mikkel, I'm not going to say the transition Mikkel's going through was easy, but I'm also not going to say it was the most difficult in the world. Mikkel's an amazing person and has a self-awareness that I don't probably have still about myself. And so he helped us along more than we helped him along, I would say, for sure. And there was clues along the way, but we also didn't want to lead Mikkel in a certain direction. So he discovered it all on his own early in high school, but the signs were definitely there. So we just kind of let that play out rather than trying to steer any one direction or the other. And what we thought was best for Mikkel was for Mikkel to discover what he was on his own. So what that's helped in the workplace is, and it's funny, I went back and looked. We're really big in feedback in my company, giving positive and constructive feedback. I looked at the feedback on me. And everything on the list, I probably acquired most of that skill or experience outside the workplace as a parent. Things like being emotionally present at the workplace, with intimacy and with empathy, listening, catching nonverbal clues, introspection, thinking about how could I do something better, problem solving, decision making, taking purposeful action. Everything's about what to do next, not to ponder and think for hours on end. And risk taking, I would say, is in there as well. And then feedback, definitely giving it and receiving it. I think I'm a better feedback person because I was a parent. You're going to get a lot of it, and so you need to learn how to give it properly as well. And then I just think performance under stress and collaboration would be the last 2 I'd kind of list. Those are kind of definitely performance under stress. Parenting developed that skill in me, and then collaboration was just finding solutions to problems or finding the best way forward. That kind of was a win-win for everyone, and not something that was a win-lose. And so I would list those things, and it was all, I think, almost all of it really developed outside the workplace. And I think companies and management has to realize that caregivers and parents have these skills, and they're hard to develop in the workplace. So these skills need to start being recognized in the workplace through when jobs are being selected. Right now, it's about what's on your resume and what jobs were you in. It's much less so about what behaviors and skills have you developed outside the workplace that need to be recognized.
Dave, I'm going to quote you on that.
You can.
Awesome. Later, I want you to tell us how you think workplaces can start to do that. I think that's a really important discussion for us to drill down into. But now Lola, I'm gonna have you come up next, and then we're gonna end with you, Emma, on this question. Because Lola, you said my book made you want to have kids after you had decided you didn't want to at the beginning of the pandemic. What changed your mind? What do you think Parenthood is going to offer you now that you've been exposed to the research behind it?
Yeah, well, thank you, Amy. I think the hope that moving forward, parenthood and care will be considered more of a collective responsibility based off of your work. And then also the opportunity to reflect critically on yourself and who you want to be while your children are becoming who they are. I think that's incredible. I think not only do I now see that there are an immense number of career critical skills to be gained from parenthood, but I think the level of fulfillment and joy that you write about finding through parenthood that could never have been found anywhere else really resonated with me. And yes, it's something that my own moms have said to me, that raising children together was the most meaningful experience of their life, the thing that brought the single thing that brought them the most joy. But I think I became quite disillusioned with the way we treat caregivers in this country during the pandemic. And Pilar, my co-founder, and I would talk about this constantly, and sort of shared a similar trajectory. But reading, I think that the combination of the rigorous research to show that parents are amazing people and incredible at their jobs and learn just life critical skills. I think that the combination of that research you aggregate with the deeply personal experience of growth with parenthood was incredibly moving for me. I actually sent it, I finished reading it in one sitting, and I put it in a box to send to my boyfriend to read immediately. So that was my experience with it. And thank you again I can't wait to listen to it in audio form.
Thank you, Lola. Thank you. I didn't pay her for that, everybody. That was organic. Onyema, we're going to end this question with you. And the question is, what have you gained and earned through parenthood that possibly nothing else could have given you? And Onyema, I would love to know, we've been spending some time together through a workshop. We've been drilling down into this week after week after week in some real subsequent detail. And you've made some big decisions recently related to being a dad. What right in this moment speaks to you? What did parenthood give you that possibly nothing else could give you? What did being a dad, how has it transformed you?
It's opened up an immense well of patience, not just with myself, but with others. And in the past life, I guess I should also mention I was a Wall Streeter for a decade too. So you can imagine being a Wall Street trader and before all this. So that was the exact opposite of patience, love, and forgiving. And then you become an executive, right?
Actually, Onyema, really quick, will you also do what Jacqueline did and just brag about yourself for a minute? Can you share with us the trajectory of your successful career as a first-generation immigrant to this country?
All right, so I'm gonna put into practice what we just talked about earlier today in regards to growth mindset, right? It's funny because I think everybody most of us had the initial cringe, like, oh no, it didn't feel like it was amazing. I just survived, but I guess. All right, we'll talk about it. So yeah, I mean, I started a career in Wall Street, late '90s. Was still an undergrad. Managed somehow to taught my way into a Wall Street firm, and still doing on the flip stocks to the flipping burgers. So I did that and wound up becoming in that particular firm the youngest and fastest promoted in division's history.
Wait, can you say that a little bit slower?
Oh yeah,
we want
to. So the New York speed talk that I do as a New Yorker. I wound up becoming the youngest and fastest promoted in that division's history, despite the fact that I was still just struggling to just pay bills and figure stuff out. From there, I moved into some fintech things and became a senior and consultancy. Then won a couple of hedge fund competitions. Still while going to school, which is crazy when I look back at that. I mean, there were people who on paper should have just demolished me, but somehow I figured it out. And then from there, my parents passed away. I lost my mom and my dad within 5 months apart, and they were my heroes. I was working partly because my father had gotten sick while I was in high school. I went to Bronx High School of Science. If anyone knows about that from New York City, and I was helping support by doing that. So fast forward a little bit, started a couple of companies. None of them were successful. Became a full-time Wall Street trader, and after that, and said, I can't do this. This is not what I want to be doing. I don't want to just keep making rich people richer with the knowledge that I have. There's nothing wrong with people having this wealth, but I mean, I think I could be doing better things with it. So I left, and went on the journey to do my doctorate in for initially physics, and then electrical computer engineering, and getting another graduate degree in applied mathematics and neuroscience and neuroengineering, and tying all that together because my main focus or interests are in general artificial intelligence, which is essentially the machine, bringing consciousness to technology, hardware, and understanding in that process, understanding our minds and how we think and how we work, and this is also motivated by the fact that I had a younger brother who passed away just 2 years ago, who was born mentally handicapped, and as a child, I always wanted to understand if we could do if I could build a neuroprosthesis, I could give him the full capacity. And unfortunately, he didn't live for the realization of that. And that's a hard one for me, but I still carry on with that thought process and that work. So I've jumped around in a lot of places. I've been a CEO, CTO of some place. I have a biotech now, and I'm happy to be, and I'm a professor too, which is a nice thing, and I love it. I don't know. I don't know if that's a brag or I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I'm just telling you things that I did. Hopefully they're interesting. And I love my kid. I want to have more. But I don't control that part. I'm just here to support. My wife has to tell me if it's okay.
Thank you, Onyema. Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left here, and I'm hoping everybody can join us for the last portion. We're going to transition into the round of specific questions I have for each person here. But before we do that, just Onyema, because you mentioned that you've now got this focus on artificial intelligence, one of the things that a chapter that I ended up cutting from my book, but that I would love for you to share your thoughts on, is the importance of having a great diversity of people, people from different races, people from different genders, people who are active caregivers involved in the creation of the technology that will drive all of our lives moving forward. Can you just say a little bit about that? Because that's something that I'd love your thoughts on.
I'll be more than happy to. I mean, the reality of it is these things, in particular, the artificial intelligence, ML, machine learning, which is really what we see more of, it's being woven more and more in the background into all the things we use, whether it be Amazon's Alexa or Google's things on your phone or Siri, and those are the ones you can give a name to identify. There's plenty more that are operating literally in the background and making decisions for us each and every day, deciding whether you get a loan, deciding whether you're able to be exposed to certain deals. What can you buy? What can you not? What might you be interested in? So clearly, it almost seems like they say the best insights in science, and I'm sure Jacqueline, you can familiarize with this. The best insights in science are the ones that they sound obvious when you realize. You're like, oh my God, why didn't anybody see that? Clearly, if we're using the in artificial intelligence, we often will take data and use that as the training set in order to build models that we can use to then make decisions independently or infer, right? If we're taking all the data from one person's perspective, which is unfortunately what we're doing in many arenas, we automatically are making things that are going to make decisions that are ill-informed or not fully informed. So it's critical for all of us, at least all people who have interest in this space, to contribute our insights, voicing how ethics is framed around this, because that's a lot of that is bleeding into the ethics of this. And how do we generate appropriate data, which is representation in its truest form? If you don't meet me or you meet other people like me, if I don't meet other people like this on the call, then all you're working off of is a stereotype, right? Because you've never met this person. You don't really know what they're about. And so imagine training super powerful things that can control all of our lives in the background, and you're just feeding them stereotypes. And that's kind of what we're doing right now. We really got to do better, because this can get dangerous. Imagine, let's take something timely. we've had a close brush with some potential conflict in some parts of the regions, and some of these things also bleed into autonomous warfare. If this thing is not trained to know the distinctions between people who are having a conversation who just might sound like they're arguing, that just may be how they interact, and thinks it's a problem, you might wind up killing someone when there's nothing of danger going on. So the long story short, I mean, that's not the best example, but to be clear, we never in our history of humanity has the scale of ignorance been so easily exacerbated. Like, you could be foolish and not know something and make bad decisions, but now you can do horribly foolish things, and it can affect millions of people. Just on social media is another place where we see this as well, because those algorithms in the background also determine what you see in your filter feed. So yeah, I mean, I hope I didn't get on a rant there, but we need to tend to that thing too, in addition to our children, because that is really making it an interesting landscape for knowledge and for truth.
Thank you, Onyema. Thank you. I want to go. We have about 14 minutes left, and I want to make sure I get everybody represented here. Dave, I would love for you. You said that workplaces need to start recognizing that the skills that are most needed in the workplace are going to be developed outside the workplace, namely in caregiving. What have you seen that's worked in terms of supporting caregivers in meaningfully remaining employed and thriving in their careers? What have you seen that's worked? And then also, if you want to tie into that, what can individual caregivers and their advocates do to advocate for themselves in these environments?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, from a policies perspective, I think corporations should continue to expand the family benefits that many employers first made available during the pandemic. And there's no reason those should end. They should only be expanded from here. And in that list is things like extended paid leave for parental bonding. We talked about that earlier. Paid leave for anyone to care for seriously ill family members. Subsidized or partially subsidized dependent care expenses and homeschooling expenses. Supporting mixed gender employee networks of caregivers who share ideas and resources, just encouraging that and fostering that, and not make it a network that has to go, be active in the closet somewhere. And then another one I've seen is returnship programs. Basically, people who've been away from the office place for a long time, but it's a reorientation and training program essentially for those who left for whatever reason and want to find out if they are ready and able to jump back in. They might not be sure. And so you give them a 2 to 3 month returnship, let them see how the company's acting now, whether they have a role to play, and then there's a job offer that comes at the end of that. And then they can either accept or reject the job offer. No harm, no foul. But so returnship programs are something I like, because it recognizes those people that are away there's been a big investment made, and there's no reason not to make it easier for those people to come back. In terms of advocacy, self-advocacy, I would first say caregivers and parents need to visibly role model the use of the policies. Things like bonding leave. If your company has an 8-week bonding leave and you're a father, take it. Tell everyone you're taking it. Make it very clear that it's a positive thing, not a negative thing. And there's an expectation that people should take it. So in my company, we have the bosses of the bosses of the bosses reaching down in the organization, checking to make sure people are taking their bonding leave. Similar for a family. Yeah, Amy.
You're making sure that the dads are taking their bonding leave.
The dads mostly, but we've had a few cases where the mother also had additional time beyond the maternity leave and could have taken that as well. But mostly the fathers, yeah. A family illness, similar. Hybrid work schedules, role model hybrid work schedules where you're working, part-time in the office and part-time at home, or maybe full-time from home, and encourage others to do the same. So normalizing the actual use of these benefits is really important, I think, to change the culture. And my other thought would be to actively engage in dialogue, with colleagues, managers, HR, interested parties, disinterested parties, whomever, around the need for much greater employee flexibility. in all its forms: work location, working hours, part-time or job sharing opportunities, on-site daycare. The days of thinking that employees cannot be productive working from home are long gone. And we need to take advantage of that change, that reality that's hit corporate management. That argument no longer plays. And so this is the moment, I think, to take full advantage of employee flexibility.
Dave, thank you. Thank you. Jacqueline, you talked earlier about taking this deep awareness that you've cultivated through this time, that your personal burnout is not a sign of your individual failure, but of a systemic failure, not just for you, but for many other, particularly moms, but I would say also engaged working dads and engaged working caregivers of all genders. And you said that it's not our individual failure, it's collective systemic failure, but that there are also solutions that can be found in addressing it at the systemic level. Can you talk a little bit about your extensive expertise and what some of those might be to meaningfully build workplaces that work for caregivers?
Right. So some of this definitely comes from my perspective, focusing on working mum burnout. But I also think it's really important that we think about the pressure that fathers have that are social pressures by society to turn up as providers, and that they don't feel free to take the leave that David is mentioning. So again, I think part of what we have to think about is that the framework we have that you provide and others in this area have provided, particularly around paid leave, is all caregivers. As you described before, we've all been taken care of, but we also all could be caregivers in situations going forward. And I think having role models of men as capable caregivers, not something to be mocked, is really important. And maybe if they're the ones that become the policy makers, that'll help us change, because I think a lot of our biases against women as leaders are deeply ingrained, and that we've seen this, for example, how attitudes change very quickly around same-sex marriage was because there was not such ingrained bias against it. So I think there's less ingrained bias against us as caregivers as a whole, and that's a really, really important framing of this. But in terms of the systemic things, I'll speak about that more from the inequalities that are baked into the system, and that those inequalities do lead to burnout, and that's why the system keeps reinforcing itself. As women are not able to rise because they're leaving the system. So, for example, we know about the maternal wall, which is that women are not promoted as often, mothers are not promoted as often as dads and childless men and women. And so lack of reward is a cause of burnout. We also know inequality in pay. There's the motherhood penalty versus the fatherhood bonus. And again, these are all tied to our ability to make choices. So during COVID, many mums left their jobs if they were in a partnership or had co-parents, because the partner or the co-parent earned more than they did. So again, for me, I feel like if we don't have equal pay in the workplace, though there isn't the opportunities to have equality in the home. So to me, these are systems-based things. And we know, for example, transparent pay bands can help with that. And then particularly, I think, in terms of the promotion process, we know how to do that in a systemic way, which is structured interviews, teams of people. And this is not just for the hiring, but also for the promotion process, teams of people that keep each other accountable to each other, because it's the accountability in the systems that is important, and then objective criteria. And I think if we want our caregiving skills to be valued, those objective criteria have to include things like team well-being as a key performance indicator. If other forms of performance are the things that are being valued and you're promoted based on sales versus team well-being, then the skills we bring are not going to be valued. So I think that's changing, but that's really where it's so important. And I know one of the pieces, Amy, that you're really bringing in is these counter stereotypes. So even, for example, having pictures of women leaders in the rooms where important decisions are made, it cues the behaviors that reduce the bias. And again, whether that's a direct, that you're aware that your bias got reduced by those cues or not, there's a lot that goes into that. But those are some of the things that we can think about. Other sort of counter stereotypes that I think are really important are, for example, if describing someone as emotional and that being seen as a negative, instead saying the emotion is a sign of emotional intelligence, and we need that in our leaders and we need that in our workplaces. So there's lots of ways that we can start to change the social norms, and the changing the bias within us is such a challenge that we need those systems that don't allow us to act on our bias. And that's why the structured interviews, team-based decisions, and objective criteria help bypass those biases.
Amazing, Jacqueline. Thank you. Thank you. Lola, I'm going to have you close us out before I say just a last word or two, and give us hope for the future. Tell us about what you are planning. Tell us, if you're open to, about your caravan plan and what you're going to do to galvanize your generation across the entire country to take a stand for caregivers.
Yes, thank you, Amy. And thank you for the details that everyone just shared in terms of how workplaces can do better for their working caregivers. Those are all things that Pilar and I tried to reflect in our Pledge to Care. And Pledge to Care was really how we launched our community and our advocacy work. And moving forward, our goal is to build community around conversations of care. So right now, what we're doing is trying to come up with a long-term sustainable structure for a community of Gen Z people to connect with older folks who want to pass on the wisdom they have around navigating working and caregiving simultaneously, to prepare our generation to enter the workforce with consciousness around these issues and prepared to advocate for the benefits and the policies that they deserve and that their workplaces should start to implement. And so first, we're assembling this community. Our Pledge to Care is an instrument that's helping to build that community. And second, we plan to take the movement on tour, not this summer, but next summer. We're planning a caravan, is what we're calling it right now, but a group of our Gen Z movement to go across the country and interact with people on different college campuses, stakeholders of various sorts, to show people that this is a movement that our generation is going to take on, and build on the incredible work before us. It's definitely a challenge. Our generation has a lot of issues that we are already activated and mobilized around, but we really believe that caregiving is essential to all the other social justice issues that our generation has mobilized around. And so once that framing has been done effectively, which is part of what we're trying to do, there's really no stopping, I think, the momentum that will build there. So thank you, Amy, for this platform. And again, thank you for your book, and thank you everyone else for what you've shared.
Lola, I'm a huge fan of what you're up to and a really proud advisor, and look forward to joining you on a leg of that journey. Thank you, everybody, for showing up for this conversation. Thank you for showing up to participate and listen. Thank you for showing up to speak and to share. Thank you for being a part of this community that is working to build a better future for all working caregivers, because as we've discussed, it intersects with everything. Care is fundamental to who we are and who we're becoming. And I want to give a huge shout out to my publisher, NationBuilder, to Sorsha Roquefort, who I've had the great blessing to work with over many years. And I think Sorsha was going to say something to close us out. And I'm just deeply grateful to this community. It has sustained me and inspired me. And today is a big part of that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Amy, and all of you for sharing just a really powerful last hour and 15 minutes. please, please, if you don't have it, get the book, NationBuilder books. I will actually pop that link into the chat right now. You're going to get some follow-up from me with the recording. If you want to be connected with any of these wonderful speakers, please do reach out. You all have my email, and we'll make sure to connect that, because the power of this is building a movement together. Amy's book looks like a book, but it is the seed of a movement. And just thank you, everyone, for being here today. We need to have it together collectively to make the change. So thank you. And we'll see you out there in the work. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.